Okay, welcome back. This is why am I saying welcome back? Actually, I'm just continuing. This is the video from 10 seconds ago, not a week later. Okay. Sorry, I took a break and I ate some lunch. Okay. Oh, I got my glass. Where are my glasses? I don't know where the glasses are. Okay. Um, anyway, I was going to talk about I was going to dead babies. I want to make sure I get to those dead babies. So let's talk about that. So the what I was saying is it was very common to have children who had died back in the year 1200 and the year 1600 and the year 1800. But we got really good at helping little tiny babies survive childhood. But back then, a lot of them didn't. Many of my students know this funny statistic. It's a really interesting example of the ways in which statistics in math class it's a very good example about why you should take those math classes that BMCC makes you take. My students are familiar with the statistic that goes, back in Shakespeare's day or whatever, or before that, the medieval period or whatever, the average lifespan was 30. My students have heard this before. It is technically true. It's not wrong that the average lifespan is 30. But I think in my students' minds and in a lot of people's minds, what that means is that people who get to be like 28, they turn into little old people and they go off to Florida. But like, no, that's not what that means. It wasn't like most people died in their 30s. That's not what that means. It's just that the average lifespan was 30. Why? Because if you know this, you've taken classes in school. If you have 4 assignments, okay, and they're each worth 25% of your grade, and you get A's on 3 of them, and then you don't turn in the fourth one, then students are like, well, I got A's on everything but one assignment. Shouldn't my grade be an A? And I'm like, no, your grade is a C. Why? Because that 0 drags the average down. Um, that's why the average lifespan back in the medieval period was 30. It wasn't because people died in their 30s. It was because if you could make it past 5, you could live until you were 60s and 70s. It's just that a lot of people didn't make it past 5. Just like so all those dead babies compared to all the old people lowered the average in the same way that having a 0 on an assignment would lower your average if you had gotten high scores on all. If you get a bunch of high scores and a 0, that 0 drags your grade way down. It's why, by the way, it's better to turn in a shitty paper instead of plagiarizing or not turning anything in at all. Because plagiarizing and not turning something in will get you a 0. But if you just give me a garbage paper, I'll give you an F on it, which is 59 points out of 100 and is way better than a 0, which you get for plagiarizing or not turning something in. Statistics can be misleading in this way. That's why it's important to take a math class so you can understand basic statistics, because it does come up. I'll give you another example of that same kind of statistic. It's one of my favorites. On average, every human being on Earth has 1 testicle. Think about that for a second. On average, just roughly speaking, everybody on Earth has 1 testicle. That is technically 100% true. That is technically true. On average, everybody on Earth has 1 testicle. It's technically true while being extremely misleading, because to find a person that had 1 testicle would be difficult. There's not very many of those. The reason why the statistic is misleading is because, on average, every person on Earth has 1 testicle. Why? Well, because there are like 9 billion people, and half of them are men, and each man has 2. So that means that there are 9 billion people, half of them are men, that's 4.5 billion men, and each man has 2 testicles, that's 9 billion testicles. So if you got 9 billion testicles and 9 billion people, then each person on average has 1. But see, it's misleading because half the population has 2 and the other half has 0, and then there are some people who are outliers. So it's that's why you got to kind of understand statistics and things. Anyway, to get back to Lady Macbeth's baby, it's the only time in the play that this baby is mentioned, but you don't see it. And because the infant mortality rate is so high, the assumption is that they had a baby who died, because they never mention the baby. You never see it, you never hear it. It doesn't seem to, they don't have children. They don't have children, the Macbeths, or they don't have living children, I should say. It is interesting. Shakespeare really understands psychology. There seems to be a hint of something really. And again, if you're watching the movie, this isn't a big ranting, raving, screaming scene. You're probably going to miss this moment. It's why more than one movie starts off with just like the one you saw, starts off with Lady Macbeth and her husband silently burying their child. And a lot of my students go, oh, why are they starting with a dead baby? That's not in the play. Well, it is in the play. They do mention having a baby, and I think it's a pretty good guess that that baby died. Um, but the movies start out with it because I think it's an important detail about their relationship that they have no children. There's a suggestion in there that like it's because they don't have children that they are ambitious about their career. They focus on career. A lot of people would focus on the next generation and children. The Macbeth don't do that. They focus on their careers, and maybe it's a reaction to having a dead baby. Maybe Lady Macbeth. What does it do to you to have a baby that dies? I know I said it was common back then, but it doesn't make it pleasant to have a baby that died. And so, what does it do to Lady Macbeth to have this dead baby? And so it suggests something important about her psychology. But in the movie, that line would go. It's in a big yelly, screamy scene, and you would miss it. And so directors, if I was reading in the book and she says, "Oh, I've given suck and know how tender it is to love the babe that milked me," I would underline that. I'd be like, "This is important." Directors underline it by putting the burial of the baby in the opening scene of the movie. And more than one movie does this because it is so important to understanding the psychology. Shakespeare is a great psychologist, and I will come back to this moment later. Okay, for now, let's continue. This is going really well. Okay, let's see what we got here. Macbeth says, if we should fail. That is, again, a really interesting line. Before, he was arguing, I don't think we should kill the king. It's morally wrong. And she talks to him and gives him arguments. It's like, you don't love me. If you love me, you'd do it. What are you scared? If you're a real man, you'd do it. If I said I was going to kill a baby, I'd do it. And then he says, but if we fail, she's already won. She won. The moment he says, if we fail, she won. Because he says, if we fail, and she says, then we fail. But screw your courage to the sticking place and will not fail. By the way, this is also an interesting moment for an actress. He says, if we should fail, and she says, we fail, but screw your courage to the sticking place and will not fail. This is a real interesting moment for an actress because different actresses will deliver that lines in very different ways. So sometimes Macbeth will say, if we should fail, and then Lady Macbeth says, we fail, but screw your courage to the sticking place and will not fail. Some actresses, when he says, if we should fail, and then the actress goes, we fail? Screw your courage to the sticking place and will not fail. So there's very different ways to say the words we failed. And that's what actors do. Actors and directors make these choices about how those lines are to be read and how they're going to interpret the scene. And there's lots of different ways to do it. Cool. Okay, this is going really well. And then the movie concludes. The scene concludes, and she gives it. I'm not going to go over this, but this is her summary of the plan. They're gonna drug the guards so they can sneak in and kill Duncan. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to make the point about this. Macbeth says if we should fail. This is an important point because earlier he was arguing it would be morally wrong to kill the king. It's the wrong thing to do in terms of morals. Now he's saying, but can we get away with it? You see how different that is? He's no longer like right or wrong. He's like practical or impractical. She's already won. Because earlier he was like, this is wrong. I don't think anyone should do this. And now he switched over to, I don't think we're going to get away with it. But see, his concerns went from moral concerns to practical concerns. So he's like, well, because if you can solve the practical problems, then he'll do it. Whereas earlier, he shouldn't be. If you have a moral objection, you shouldn't do it no matter what. But if you have a practical objection, like I don't think we can get away with it, all someone has to do is explain how you're going to get away with it, and you're going to agree. So she's already won at the point at which she says we fail. And then the scene ends with. He says, bring forth men, children only, for thy undaunted mettle, that's like material, should compose nothing but males. He basically says to her, only have boy children, because you're such a badass. Only boy children will. You're so manly. You should only pass that down to male children and have lots of boys because you're so manly. Again, really interesting in terms of gender that's how he sees his wife. I'm going to try to find a clip of this scene for you, and I'll put it after this video. And it's worth going over again because this is something I try to do is I try to go over the scene in detail and then let you watch a clip of it because the first time you read it, you're trying to figure it out, and then I go over it and explain it. When you hear it again, then you're like, oh wow, this actually makes a lot of sense because now it's been you've had a chance to think about it. All right, I'll pick it up in the next video.